The challenges were probably trying to help people with their mind state towards eating vegetables. That has been a real challenge. I give a prime example. We had a lady come in last year. My wife was attempting to give her some samples of our vegetarian food, or vegan food in this case. And she was like, and so my wife asked her the question, said, do you eat chitlins? Yes. Pork chops? Yes. And you're scared of vegetables? And you doing all of this, I mean, what, that's like garlic to a vampire. So, so after that, she eased up quite a bit because she realized how crazy she looked doing that to vegetables. But this is just, that's been the hardest challenge, is getting people to change their mindset from just being almost totally meat eaters to becoming vegans.
Some of the challenges at first was figuring out what to eat, but that went away pretty quick. It was actually a lot easier than I thought, a lot easier. And now I don't even think twice about what I'm gonna eat. It's just automatic. It's just a different routine compared to being an omnivore eating omnivorous diet. Other challenges, I would say, it hasn't happened much. It's getting better, but there was some teasing, especially about it not being a manly thing to do. But when you think about eating meat, you know, what's so manly about paying someone to kill an innocent baby animal for you? So, yeah, other challenges kind of internally. You know, I see this injustice happening, just like other injustices happening, and in other parts of my life as well. But with veganism, and I see an animal, you know, a chicken or whatever at the grocery store. If that was a dog, people would be freaking out. But here you see a bunch of chickens, a bunch of dead cows, and I just see dead body parts. And I find it a little bit traumatizing. It's frustrating. I just wish people would see it that way, but I understand why people don't see it that way for the same reason. You know, I went 20 years of my life without being vegan, so you know, I was kind of blinded to what happened. I really didn't know, and just conditioned to think, oh yeah, it's perfectly normal to be killing these animals for no good reason other than for taste. So that's a big internal struggle, and to remember that with people, that as much as I want everyone to be vegan like right now, we're conditioned in such a way that it makes it difficult for that to happen overnight. Because I was familiar with veganism even before I went vegan, even for a couple years, but at some point when I saw the footage is when it hit me. And for some people it might take a little bit longer. Again, we're so conditioned to think that it's okay to have these dead animals in our fridge, these dead animals being sold everywhere we go.
Well, I'm a retired fire captain paramedic, and I made this transformation when I was on the department, the fire department. And I got a lot of ribbing. But as it turns out, I happen to be one of the best athletes on the department. We used to have a traveling softball tournament team, and we would go to the national levels and compete with the biggest cities in the country: Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, all of these huge fire departments that had thousands of people to choose from. And we had a little 100-man department, and we would always be at the top, in the top 10, and one year we were in the top 3. So when I made up my mind to change my diet, and my performance actually improved, it caught the eye of a lot of people in my department. There wasn't, for me personally, it wasn't that big of a challenge when I became vegan. I knew what the facts were. I knew the benefits of it. So the fact that somebody else may make fun of me or something like that didn't deter me from continuing down that path, because I knew how it was benefiting me. And frankly, the reason that I initially went vegan was for the environment. Then I realized the health benefits of it. And now what really keeps me steadfast in this pursuit of educating the public is that the animals, the suffering that goes on in factory farms, even on considered family farms, there's so much of that suffering. And all of these animals end up in slaughterhouses, and it's horrific what goes on in those places. From the workers that are there to the animals, how they're disassembled. It's just horrific, and I didn't want any part of it any longer.
It was difficult at times, because a lot of times some people didn't provide you, any options other than, of course, the salad or, the vegetables. But I've learned myself that, hey, as long as I see these staples, there might be rice and beans. There's different things that they have that are still, available, that you can choose instead of, maybe the oxtail and the jerk chicken and what have you. But there's also, you still have vegetables that go along with that. I will tell you of an instance when I was stationed on board ship that it can become a little more difficult to be plant-based, because of course, there's a certain diet and a certain menu that they're going to have every week on board, a ship or even on board a military installation. So the menu, of course, the center is going to be some type of meat. And then, of course, there's probably some, smaller vegetables here and there. But when I was on board ship, when I was a senior staff non-commissioned officer, I was in the chief's mess. I had a fellow chief. She was in charge of the chief's mess, so she ordered the food for the chief's mess, and it was really a blessing because she was plant-based herself, so she ordered some type of veggie burgers, and every week they would have on the menu what they called sliders, which was nothing more than a hamburger, but they would have these sliders. And what I had noticed a lot of times is while I was there, I'd be working on the flight deck or in the well deck on board amphibious ships while in the Marine Corps, and I would come up from the well deck or even down from the flight deck, and I'd come to lunch there, and when I could get away, and I come there, and all of a sudden I realized that all the veggie burgers were gone, and the messman in the chief's mess would say, "Hold on, we'll get you some a veggie burger." And I asked, I said, "Well, what happened to them all? I thought it was only me and another chief or someone on board were the only really plant-based people on board." And they said, "Well, no, that's not it." They said, Master Sergeant, it's just one of those things that when people tend to have an option to eat healthy, they do," which was really interesting to me because it's just that simple. When people are given the option to eat something healthy, they tend to do so. And so to me, that kind of proved a lot of point why becoming plant-based is encouraged and just the best thing to do for us all to maintain optimal health.
The year that I went vegan, my entire family was like, "Yeah, your period is gonna stop, your teeth and hair is gonna fall out, like, you're gonna die, get ready, girl." And I mean, saying I'm still here is like the worst argument ever, so I'm not saying that. If you look at the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, that say that humans at any age from birth, including newly born babies with an adequate balanced diet, can eat plant-based and be healthy, I would just say, listen to the scientists, don't listen to me. I tried to tell that to my family. I tried to tell that to my friends. I lost some friends, which I'm not sure even if they were friends, if they really were trying to push me the other way, Yeah, I guess that now is like a great quantifier of, are you really my friend? Are you really kind? Do you really care about what I want to do? Because if people care, they're going to respect what you want to do, right? They're going to respect my opinion if I want to, dye my hair blue, as long as my actions don't harm anybody. as long as I want to do this for me, I want to eat plant-based for me. Now, if I want to do some questionable behavior, hopefully they'll tell me, right? That's how friendship works. But being vegan is not questionable behavior. You shouldn't worry for somebody, or you should go freaking educate yourself. So if people like that are in your way, then maybe consider educating them. And if they're resistant, yeah, are you really friends?
Of course, the main challenges with veganism really are other people. We want our family to be vegan, right? And that's very often the hardest, our closest friends and family. I remember in my case, for example, my mother, my sister, I really wanted them to go vegan, and years went by, and I kept bringing them videos, showing them different scenes, talking about it. It never worked, and sometimes they'd get angry and say, oh, you know, this is ridiculous. But I just kept planting seeds, and after about 15 years, my sister wrote, and they're fundamentalist Christians, she wrote to me and she said, the Lord came to me and told me to go vegan. And I think, you know, the most important thing is to just be persistent, to meet any challenge as best we can with love and understanding. And it's been so wonderful now. My sister's been a vegan for, gosh, probably 20 years. And so to have the big picture and do the best we can, and ultimately we'll be victorious. I'm sure of that. The most important thing is to just meet everything we can. Whatever negativity comes toward us, try to turn that around and be loving and positive in response to that.
You know, when I chose this vegan path, I think the biggest challenges were socially with family. That was really tough. And, you know, my biological family certainly didn't understand why I was doing this, and they thought I just wanted to be different, which wasn't true at all. I always kind of wanted to fit in, but I never figured out where the box was I was supposed to fit in. And it was challenging, you know, like my father would say, you know, he'd pound on the table in the restaurant if we went out to eat like a goddamn normal person. And I stopped going out to eat with my family, and, you know, at different events. I didn't want to stand out too much, you know, weddings and whatnot. There was always a special thing that was served to me rather than, you know, what everybody else was getting. And I didn't want to be the one who is high maintenance or different. So that was really challenging for me. And then I sort of changed my outlook on it, and just the way I felt about it, the way I projected out in the world about it. And I decided, oh, I get to be an invitation for a possibility. And rather than fighting things as they were, I decided to be really inviting about what could be. And it really changed things, you know. So instead of like, I'm not coming to Thanksgiving because you serve this animal. Instead of that, it was, come to my house for Thanksgiving. It will be fabulous. You don't have to cook. And just come enjoy yourself. So I just started to take a different turn in it. And inviting whenever possible, like creating an irresistible community of positive, vegan choices. And it's great. Like now, I can't even believe I ever struggled with it at all, because now I have like an infinite number of chosen family and biological family who are vegan. They choose compassionate living. I can't even keep up with everyone. You know, so it really, I don't know, it's one of the most positive choices I ever made in my life. You know, the beautiful chosen family that I have, the beautiful biological family that I have, who care about more than just humans and human interests. And we have so much in common, and it's like a love fest when we get together. So it's, I couldn't have made a better choice, even though it was a little challenging in the beginning.
One of the things that I think that people have to anticipate is that once you let people in your life know that you're changing your diet, everybody's going to become a nutrition expert. For instance, when I came home and told my father that I had decided I was going to stop eating meat, he tried to intimidate me out of my decision. He said, well, look, I'm not fixing anything different around here, so if you're going to eat differently, you're on your own. And looking back, I realized that, you know, my father knew nothing about being plant-based, and from his perspective, he probably thought I was doing something that was unwise and unhealthy. And so his response was to try and, shock me out of it. Fortunately, he didn't try to tell me, you can't do that. I guess he thought he would just sort of make it hard for me, and that eventually I would give up on what was, a foolish endeavor. I'm happy to say that didn't happen. Obviously stuck with my dietary choice. And again, I give God the credit for giving me the strength and the will to do that. But I think that, people will have to anticipate that the people that, some or even many of the people in their lives may not understand their dietary choices and will try to actively dissuade them from continuing with that choice. Other things that challenges that I've run into is when I was a resident, as a resident, we were required to attend noontime lectures. And because we had to be at the lecture, we couldn't go get our own lunch. So the chief residents would have drug reps provide lunch for the residents. Well, when I would come to lunch, it was always crap. It was always meat. So I went and I told the chief residents, I said, look, I don't eat this stuff. If you don't have the reps start to provide non-meat alternatives, I'm not coming to the lecture. And since the chief residents got brownie points on how many of the residents attended lecture, it behooved them to talk to the drug reps to have them provide non-meat alternatives. Well, then what would happen is that when the drug reps would provide the plant-based alternatives, I had to make sure I was at lecture, right when it started, because those were the first things that people would eat. And which was completely unfair, because I'm like, you guys can eat this, the rest of this trash, and I can't, but you're going to eat up anyway. So it's kind of a mixed blessing. One, I'm glad they're eating, the non-meat stuff, but I'm like, hey, leave something for me. You have to be assertive and not be intimidated by people's lack of understanding of your choices, and be willing to help them understand how they can help you adhere to your choice. So, as a resident, I felt, I have a right to expect you to help support my dietary choice because I'm a part of this program. When I finished residency and started attending medical conferences, when a drug company was launching a new drug and they wanted us to come to a conference to learn all about their new drug launch, they would send us these questionnaires to ask if we had any special needs. Well, I was very clear about my dietary needs. And I remember we had this really nice conference that was planned for Cancun. I mean, nice. And I went, and the opening night banquet, they had roast beef, they had roasted chicken, they had ham, they had a shrimp buffet. I'm looking at all this stuff and I'm like, where's the plant-based alternative? And so I called the coordinator over and I'm like, hey, I don't eat meat. What is there for people who are, plant-based? And she said, oh, well, we have salad or stir fry. And I said, ma'am, that's rabbit food. If I eat that stuff, I'm gonna be hungry in about an hour or two. I'm like, I need something to eat. And she's like, oh, well, okay, well, just tell me what you want and I'll have the kitchen to prepare it. I'm like, whoa. None of the other attendees had to come here with a menu in hand to tell you how to take care of them. I shouldn't either. This is a major hotel. They ought to know how to fix plant-based options. Talk to them and have them come up with something. I'm happy to say that she did exactly that. And for the rest of the conference, they had a great spread for the people who were vegetarian, vegan. But the thing that blew my mind was that after I had this conversation, probably 7 or 8 other attendees came up to me and said, oh, I'm so glad you said something. I was thinking the same thing, but I just didn't want to say anything. And see, that's why we suffer. There's an old expression that says a closed mouth doesn't get fed. And when we're afraid to speak up, we don't have our needs met. So We should not be afraid to be assertive without being rude or mean or confrontational, but by being direct, because we have a right to expect to be taken care of, to have our needs met. And what we're asking for is not exotic, it's not weird. Nobody has to go, to the South Seas to pluck some special plant that only grows on one island in the, some coral atoll out there. No, we're just asking for healthy, plant-based options that everybody by now should know how to prepare and to prepare well. And again, I'm not talking stir fry and salad. That is not going to cut it.
I would say that my family was pretty great about it. Like they accommodated me as a 10-year-old wanting to be vegetarian pretty easily. And then they went mostly that way when I was a kid. They've always been very open-minded and sort of renegade, avant-garde type. So I was lucky. I had a supportive family. But I think every vegan out in the world, it's a different story. And I definitely have lost friends, a lot of them, sort of just from my close inner circle. We may still be friendly, but it's just weird to be putting so much into this and rescuing chickens and then sort of be invited to a party at their house and they're serving chicken. And just once you sort of get out of the mainstream diet and the mainstream world of harming animals, it's just very weird to be around that anymore. And I tend to get a little depressed, because I share what I do and I try to be really eloquent about it, but it doesn't always affect people. And then you just feel yourself sort of drifting away, but you find new friends and you find a chosen family that is really great. As with everything in life, it's not about the labels ultimately. And anyone can put a label on themselves, but they may not actually be that. And compassion is a label that people put on themselves very proudly. And the best thing we can each do is just look for the authenticity of what you're needing. So, if you're looking for a compassionate world, it's not always where the places have the big sign that says sanctuary or compassion, but keep going because you will find your community. And sort of I did, and it was through a lot of, hard work and sort of a lot of disappointment, brokenheartedness, and sort of picking myself up and moving on to the next place. But eventually, I have a pretty solid and kind and beautiful and hardworking vegan community. I have a kitty walking through this. Hi, Normal. That's Normal. Little Nermy, hi.
Like going vegan and making friends are, usually not two things you associate together. I mean, it's gotten vastly better over the 10 years of being vegan. Initially, the expectation is you're going to lose friends and family who either communicate with you or want to communicate with you. And it's twofold. One is you feel so passionately that you need to do something, and so you are sharing the message. And that can be off-putting because people like to live in their comfortable bubble where, they don't have to think about things or challenge themselves. And so you're essentially challenging everything. And a lot of times with friends and family, there's this feeling on their part that if you now think that those things are not okay and they're wrong to do, and that you're basically judging all of your time that you ever spent with them, and you're saying that there was something wrong with it, rather than realizing that people can change and adapt and have new ways of viewing things and grow, and that they could grow with you by embracing this new understanding. But a lot of times what it does is makes people decide that they just are done with you, or they want to fight with you and argue in ways that they must realize to some degree absurd, but because it's such a You know, it's like the brain protects itself. And so if the brain is being told, hey, this thing that I'm doing is morally reprehensible, you know, there's that choice of, can I change or can I just deny that it's reprehensible? And unfortunately, the brain, I think, is typically better at denying reality than adjusting to it. And so you end up with a lot of people who will defend things that there's no way they actually feel good about. You know, they'll say things that there's no way they actually feel, because it helps to compensate for that feeling of like, I don't really feel right about this. So
going into the lifestyle 23 years ago, of course, I was looked at as being crazy for even thinking to go into that lifestyle. And during that time period, you didn't have as many vegan options. So luckily, Duke University was 10 minutes away from, not even 10, 5 minutes away from North Carolina Central University, where they had Whole Foods there. So Whole Foods has always kind of been in the realm of it. You know, the universe will always bring what you need or what you're searching for, whether it's good or bad, the universe will bring it to you. So I had other people, Rastafarians, Ethiopians, and other people that have been into the lifestyle to show me certain things to get. But some of the most difficult aspects was that you're breaking habits. And anytime that you have to break a habit, that's difficult. You know, they say that it takes 21 days to break a habit. Sometimes I'll say longer than that. So once you've been doing something for so long and you've been conditioned to do it for so long, your DNA, your cells and everything will call for it as you're trying to break it. So those are some of the most difficult aspects. But every hurdle that you get over, mentally you become stronger. You become stronger through the discipline, because discipline, what you're eating, brings on success in every other aspect in your life. So conquering those mental aspects, because that's all it is, it's only mental. And as you conquer that, you become stronger. So yeah, one of my biggest issues was just conquering that aspect of, okay, I'm going to actually give up chicken. I'm actually going to give up eating Whoppers and things of that nature. So that was my biggest issue.
I really loved butter. Butter was raw. I always had it raw from the Alps. And this was my hardest thing, the butter. So now I had a choice. Either I make an exception and I search. I came to America here, and then I went to the different health food stores, and asked about butter, if they have some from the Alps. I was totally not American then. And they said, no, we don't have such a thing. We have this. This would be your best bet. I said, is it pasteurized? And then they said, yes. And I said, no, I don't eat pasteurized. Then everything is already killed. So I need other butter. I couldn't find it. And Will said, you know, you won't find butter this way. Do you really need to eat butter? He said. I said, yeah, I just love bread, fresh bread, self-made bread with butter. So then I decided, okay, I just give it up. And nowadays, Miyoko Schinner came out with this butter. It nearly tastes like Swiss butter. I mean, she is a genius, absolutely, all these cheeses she makes. Nowadays, it's not even difficult anymore.
My first challenge in going vegan, because I had struggled with overweight all my life, was the idea that with all those carbs, I would never lose weight and I would be destined to obesity forever. Well, what happened in my case was the exact opposite. I was also in a recovery program for compulsive eaters, so I was getting the emotional stuff taken care of. But my food choices, too, contributed to being able to eat 3 rational meals a day. The weight fell off without even noticing, and I've kept it off for 37 years, which is probably some kind of record for the Guinness Book. But in addition to the good surprises that happened in that way, I gave birth to my daughter several months before I became vegan. And I looked down at her one day in the crib and knew that I just needed to raise her vegan. And that was also a big impetus for my finally taking it all the way. And one would think that raising a child in a Midwestern city in the 1980s, I would get a lot of flack from everywhere. But the truth is, I didn't. And I think part of that is that I just stood my ground. I never said to a pediatrician or the grandparents or the in-laws, well, I'm trying this thing and I'm not sure it's right, but I think it's a good idea. No, no, no. I just said, we're vegan. Here's the literature, so that they could know that the grandchild was going to be healthy. And that's it. I'm not asking your opinion, I'm not asking your advice, and I'm not asking your permission. I know this is right for myself, for my family, and it's just what I'm going to do. We actually had virtually no flack. At one point, somebody sent home from preschool a little note that said, you're missing one of the 4 food groups, and they checked off the dairy group. And I went in the next day with a full lecture planned, and I'm pretty sure that they never again told anybody that a child was missing something from the dairy group. So I think a lot of it is to be firm in your convictions, to be well educated and know what you're talking about, and to live rationally. What happens sometimes is that people get off on tangents and they think, well, maybe I don't really need to supplement B12, or maybe I don't have to think at all about nutrition, or whatever it might be. That's not going to help the cause, because anytime we have any sort of problem, people who don't like veganism are going to say, well, that problem comes because you're vegan. So problems are going to come just because we're human, and yet you want to avoid as many as possible, especially those that are dietary related. And particularly if you're raising children, you need to remember that vegan kids are getting more information than little people really need to have. They understand that there's a great deal of suffering in the world, that these beautiful innocent animals that they relate to so much are being eaten by people that they love, like grandma, or people that they respect, like their teacher. So we're expecting them to appropriate a lot of really sophisticated information. So we need to be there for them every step of the way. And I'm proud to say that my daughter, I'm not going to tell you her age, that's her business, but she is not only a lifelong vegan, she is a stunt performer and an aerialist. So no wimpy vegans around here.
So challenges of being vegan, especially back in the 90s, the really negative stigma that was associated with veganism, that has fortunately really changed over the years. You know, if you went to a restaurant, if you went to the doctor, if you told family members, if you met new people, then there was almost always a very negative view of veganism and what a vegan is. And so that was really difficult. So that is something that has positively changed over the years. And also the diversity of folks that are vegan. So there used to always be this idea, because this is the only voice that was ever shared, was that vegans were young, white, middle-class folks. So fortunately, that's something that has changed over the years, that all of these different voices have been able to finally make it out into mainstream media. Vegans are all kinds of different folks. It's not just the folks standing out protesting in front of the circus or throwing blood on someone. Everywhere, all different parts of society, and that has been a really important part. But it was very difficult to share with anyone. And I know that it still can be, especially for older family members, especially for going to large family dinners. That can be really challenging. And telling your great grandma that you can't eat something, you're choosing to not eat something that she made that's really special to the family. Navigating some of those really intricate familial parts is really challenging sometimes. I think just the most important part is just really reminding ourselves of why we've made this choice and why it's really, really important. The other thing that was really hard was finding really good things to eat in the 90s and early 2000s. And that was a big deterrent for a lot of folks choosing veganism, actually, because of accessibility. even just buying veggie burgers or soy milk, we were having to go to the specialty stores and they were very expensive. So it was definitely cost prohibitive for a lot of folks to wanting to be able to make that transition. You know, living in the college dorms, if you're eating in college cafeterias, there were no options. Going out to restaurants, there were hardly any options. It might be a hummus plate or just a salad. So just seeing that change over the decades has been really incredible. And just the fact that there are so many vegan options in every grocery store, even in Walgreens, Walmart, Target, name the grocery store, you can find products that are competitively priced, that are accessible and available to everyone. Pretty much any restaurant you can go to and find a good, healthy vegan option. That has just really changed the game because accessibility was a really large barrier for folks and affordability was a really large barrier. And both of those things have changed tremendously, and that has made such a really big difference. When it was really hard to find those options and I'm in college and I can't afford to buy everything at the tiny health food store where everything was really expensive, then I definitely wasn't eating really healthy. I was eating a lot of junk food and not eating a lot of fresh, healthy fruits and vegetables or whole grains. So I definitely struggled with that for quite a few years. And fortunately, I was able to learn and realize that I don't have to buy all of these kind of pre-made products. It's nice that there's a replacement for everything. There's Tofurkey slices, and there's every type of veggie burger and veggie bacon and cheese and ice cream, which are all wonderful and so grateful for. But I also was able to learn that I can just kind of eat the basics and eat the grains and the beans and the fresh fruits and vegetables. So that took me a while to learn. Learning how to cook was really crucial. I grew up eating meat and dairy products, and so that's what I always saw my parents cooking. So I definitely had to teach myself how to cook and learn how to flavor things and spice things up. And so that was definitely a big learning curve. That's really important. And that's one of the reasons I always love sharing a lot of recipes with folks and cooking tips. That's really important. And that's how I made it through the 90s and the early 2000s.
Challenges I face being vegan, I think one of the ones I noticed early on, because I thought after I read about the horrible things that happened to the animals that we call food, I thought as soon as other people learned about this, that they would be like me and say, oh, I can't be a part of this anymore. I'm not going to fund that, and I'm going to change the way I eat and live. And I was kind of wrong about that, which was very disappointing. So I found that to be challenging, to realize that not everybody seemed to care. I tried to make, the little victories, the people that were at least willing to take a flyer from me or to watch a video about the animal welfare, and then just leading by example. To be kind and compassionate and provide a good specimen of a healthy person, a healthy vegan. Family, not so much. I mean, I've always kind of done what I wanted to do, and I can be quite stubborn on things, so I really wasn't affected by what family thought, not that it was really an issue. With some friends, I think like a lot of us, we did lose friends when we went vegan, and I wasn't included as many things. Like if coworkers were going out to eat, you might not be invited because they were going out for wings or whatnot. Until really that I found other people like me, it was a little bit lonely. Found other people that thought and lived like I did. And it's definitely gotten easier with the internet, Facebook, meetup groups. But back then it was, it definitely was more challenging. So I went vegan when the grocery store did not sell plant-based milk or a lot of the things. We used to go to this weird little health food store. I remember buying like powdered soy milk. Oh my God. So when people tell me it's hard, I'm like, you don't know the meaning of hard. I'd go to restaurants and people would think we were of some kind of weird religion, and I'd order a baked potato plain and salad, no cheese, no bacon, no. So I would get a bowl of lettuce. And it's amazing how selfish people are. I mean, because I like food, I love to eat, I like my goodies, and but you learn how to cook a few things, and it really wasn't that difficult. It's akin to not stealing. I don't have the idea of stealing anytime I go into a store, even though there's stuff I wanted. And it's the same thing. Over the years, I've tried to think of clever euphemisms for why I do what I do, and things that people might get. Because, you know, especially people that rescue like dogs and cats, it's like, well, why are you eating these animals? And then like, we've always done it. And it's like, well, at one time we said that about slavery and, you know, women's rights. I mean, if that were the case, if we always done it, I wouldn't be voting and I'd probably be barefoot and pregnant.
Of course, it isn't perfectly easy to be vegan in a world that is often, you know, not vegan or even hostile to it, because people don't want to feel judged. People want to be able to continue doing the things that they grew up doing, that they like doing. It wasn't actually that difficult for me to switch my food choices. I did it a little gradually because I was vegetarian first, and then I realized, oh, dairy and eggs aren't great either. In fact, they could be worse. So I already had established the things that I could eat, started figuring out the different products that were vegan. So it was a little bit of a process for me. But what was really difficult was the relationships and how other people didn't always understand, or how I didn't understand how they could still be making those decisions if they had the information. And for me, the challenge was to reconcile that in myself, to continue to have compassion for others, and to recognize that everyone is on their own journey, and that I could make it a lot less challenging and frustrating for myself if I looked back at my own past and even my own present and see where I'm not perfect, and where I still have some long way to go, or hopefully some short way. And that made it easier to overcome that challenge of the social aspects.
I haven't had challenges in being vegan, but again, I'm one of those people that likes challenges, so perhaps that which would be considered a challenge, I didn't even notice it. I like, it's easier to navigate now, but even when we didn't, I liked trying to find something. I used to work for a big financial firm, and they would take us to steak dinners, and they were always surprised when I would show up. And they said, oh, there's nothing here for you. And I said, no, the chef will find something. And going out, and I remember most of the time they would come up with a pasta dish, but one steakhouse, they didn't know what to give me, so came out with a big plate of broccoli. And I love broccoli, so it wasn't much of a challenge, but that's hard for me. I don't feel like there's been any challenge. My family has been supportive. My dad used to tease me if you ever said you were cold. He would say, you're not getting enough meat, but it was in a loving way. My family has volunteered at the Veg Fest with me for the last 17, 18 years, and my friends always say, you're so lucky. I never realized until I see how other families aren't always supportive. My dad, he was 70 years old going through chemo, and he still stood with me giving out vegan literature. And one event, we were giving out sausages, and he knew I was going to be disappointed if we went home with any sausages because I wanted to give them all out. And the event was ending, and he took the plate and walked to every single vendor and to make sure that we went home with no sausages. And vendors who were getting ready to pack up for the day, they hadn't had food all day, so they were grateful to him. And my mom always does the children's activities. My sisters does the children's activities at the Veg Fest. So everyone in my family has really got on board. My brother still teases us, but you're always going to have the one person in the family who teases. But
if people are having challenges, whether it be with diet or with social situations, whether it be with their family or their spouse or another loved one, there are plenty of support groups online, primarily Facebook. Whatever city you're in, if you type in vegans of whatever city it is, you'll find a group of people, and you'll find people that you can talk to and that are willing to talk to about this. One thing that I'll say about the vegan community and the broader animal rights community is that they're some of the most welcoming and heartfelt people that I've ever been associated with. People that care about animals and the environment, generally care about other people, and know exactly what it's like to be ostracized for, I wouldn't even say it's having a belief, it's having a lack of belief. You don't believe that animals should be treated this way. So yeah, find the community. There's definitely people out there. Even if you're in some small town, there's other people there for sure.
Okay, I have had challenges being vegan, but I've never questioned it from the day that I became vegan. The challenges mainly were with my family. They were supportive of my work in general, but none of them eat like I eat. And it made it difficult for me to have Thanksgivings with them and Christmas with them and other meals with them, because we would have to have 2 separate meals, and that made it more complicated for everybody. So I just said that I'll do my own thing a lot of the time, and a lot of the time they said that they would be willing to do that if it was at their house. If it was at my place, of course, there'd be a vegan option. But I've become accustomed to going into a restaurant and asking if they have a vegan option, and doing so with kindness, not with judging them that they're bad people. They're just doing what they learned, just as I did what I learned for the first 30 years of my life. Non-judgmentalism is part of this path, and veganism is a big part of the path. It's the physical part of the path, it's the spiritual part of the path.
When I became vegan, I had moved to Washington, D.C. to work for animal rights. So there was a community of vegans here. So it was very accepting. And that's great to have the camaraderie. But my family was not vegetarian or vegan. Fortunately, my family, for the most part, was very accepting. And we actually had, when we had family events, they were vegan events. People were willing to do that. And some of my family actually did go vegetarian. Some actually did go vegan. So I've had a really good experience with it. What I find challenging is the public attitude, just there's so much ignorance and so much denial. You get all kinds of silly comments like, what about plants feeling? And it's great if people care about plants. Mostly that's not. Mostly it's just to deflect. Even if you do believe that plants feel pain, you're causing fewer plants to die on a vegan diet. There's really no good excuse not to be vegan. What I find challenging about being vegan is really public resistance and ignorance about it.
There was one interesting occurrence that happened with my family. We had a Thanksgiving dinner that was planned over at my brother's house. And I said, well, I would love to come and I will come, but I'm going to come after the dinner because I don't want to have a turkey on the center of the plate. I just don't want to, or center of the table. I just don't want to be part of that. But I would like to come and commune with everybody and have a good time. And my brother and his family and wife thought about it, and they said, we're going to make it a vegan Thanksgiving. And so here, just because I was trying to live my values, they honored that and allowed me to come for the whole meal, which was wonderful.
When I would go home for just to visit my friends or my family, it was challenging because they weren't necessarily going to cook something especially for me. However, over time, it's interesting because at first I would maybe buy some of my own food, cook my own food, or make something my own. But after I would share some with my sisters or my brothers, I noticed that they tended to change from regular milk to almond milk or different things like that. But what's been really a blessing recently is that my sister and brother-in-law have been buying, I think it's a Gardein holiday roast every Thanksgiving for me. So I have something, as a substitute than the turkey and the ham and different things that they serve. But I mean, I'm perfectly satisfied with what most people may not like, but I sure love it. And it's the green bean casserole every Thanksgiving. So it's like I said, but I'm truly blessed by having a family that kind of understand that they don't necessarily give me too hard of a time. I mean, but it's been a blessing at least to know that hey, somebody cares, that they still love you and they still will try their best to accommodate you if they can.
That's a tricky one because there's components that were completely easy because dates and peanut butter is delicious, right? But yeah, there's times when it's tricky. But I would submit that the difficulty is rewarding.
When I make a decision, nothing's really going to deter me. So the challenges were just getting vegan options wherever I was. My family, not really. They were like, you know, the only thing that I did have a challenge was, you know, like they're like, you know, you're crazy. Like, so I've had some challenges in becoming vegan. As I said, when I was in college, my friend Mike kind of invited me to become vegan, but because society, my family and colleagues had told me that eating animal flesh was the thing that was normal, I didn't want to change. 8 years ago, when Mike came back to the house, I was a little bit more mature and more open to step out of the box society put us in and think for myself. And then, once I was there, I was able to make up my own decision. And the first thing that happened was that I was kind of angry at first because I was lied to. I was helping and condoning violence towards animals. Challenges in my day-to-day were something like vegan products. There were none 8 years ago here in Albuquerque. As a matter of fact, when I went to restaurants, they'd go, "What is vegan?" And I'd have to let them know what vegan is. And they'd go, "Well, we have nothing vegan." And I'd say, "Do you have rice? Is it made with any animal products?" "No." I said, "That's vegan." "Do you have beans?" And we go down the menu. So it was like an educational thing. So kind of madness that I had about that, I took it as an opportunity to educate others. So then I just wanted to, wherever I was, say vegan and have somebody ask me a question about it. But as the years went along and as more and more people started to hear the message, it has become easier. But of course, the biggest challenges at first was, first of all, not having a place to go to for information, not being able to find the products, not knowing exactly what was vegan or not, because even though you go to the store and there's a can that may say beans, if you look at the ingredients, they have all kinds of things in it that is not good for you. So I had to go ahead, read the label, so it took me hours to go to the store because I'd have to read each can, each product and stuff like that. So I love it. So if you want me to buy it, put a V on it. Others might have challenges with their friends and family, but to tell you the truth, my family lets everyone each to its own. So I didn't have much of that. At work, there was a little bit, but not much, just a little bit of maybe saying things like bacon or, you know. But other than that, really people let me be who I wanted to be and respected that. As a matter of fact, they said, "I respect you, I wish I could." And then I would go on and say, "Well, you can." Now, the thing I could tell you about is that it affects me when I go and to an event and there's other people who are having animal flesh on their plates, and I see death and I see misery and my heart breaks. And I tell you that since I went vegan and researching more and more aspects of veganism, it breaks my heart. And sometimes I do have to take a minute and just cry and let it out because it does affect me, it hurts me. And when someone says a joke that they think it's funny, I might put up a front and a poker face, but really inside my heart, it makes me cry. Because I can't understand how if I tell you that something is causing pain and suffering to someone, whether it be human or non-human, why wouldn't you at least consider the possibility of changing? Why wouldn't you connect the two and just be against suffering? So that is a challenge when someone says, "Oh, I only have free range." And I have to say, well, do they end up on your plate? None of the animals are coming up in line and going, "Okay, cut my throat next because I want to be whatever you want it to be." So those things hurt, and I have to kind of put up a wall when I'm on there so that I don't want to get mad or angry at people, because I understand that everybody has their own path to veganism. I totally understand because I did it. I told my friend, "Here are my canines." So I totally understand that, but I don't understand if someone expresses that there is a living being that is suffering, why would you not care a little bit more about ending that or finding out more about that? So that still breaks my heart.
I think the biggest challenges that I've had is with friends and family after going vegan. I've heard it described as, you know, when you're vegan, you're trying to pull drowning animals, out of the water, and then everyone around you, your friends, your family, everyone is throwing them back in, and that's what it feels like, a lot of the time. And after going vegan, I sort of had this, epiphany of, oh my gosh, I've been, this has been wrong. Like there's this, huge injustice going on towards animals, and so, there's people that I'm close to and that I think are good people, and so. I was convinced that if I could just share this information with them, if they knew what I knew, then of course they would go vegan too. Of course they wouldn't, want to hurt animals, and of course they'd want to make the same changes I did. And I quickly discovered that that's not the case. And it's hard when there are people that you believe are otherwise good people, and having to reconcile that they have all of the same information that I have, and they're still choosing this other path, and they're still justifying it or okay with it, or just simply don't care enough to make that change. And so it's hard to to still view those people the same way, and it changes relationships. And it's hard to visit family because I don't want to sit at a table where people around me are eating the dead bodies of animals when they easily could have been one of the animals that I live with now. And so it definitely changes things, and it helps to sort of surround yourself with other vegans, but at the same time, reaching people who aren't vegan is, one of the most important things that we want to do. And so, we kind of have to, put ourselves out there and, try to talk to people who, are not vegan or are still eating animals. And, we go for walks with Charlotte or one of the pigs, and, people will make bacon jokes, or they'll yell something, from across the way, and having to hear, them talk about your loved one like that is really challenging. But part of trying to make this change in the world is, you have to kind of deal with that and hear those comments and, keep pushing through it and, not let it stop you or hold you back, and try to, still view the world as, being a place that you want to be, because it's very easy to, see the world as being this, evil place where, nobody cares, and there's so much suffering and pain. And so, making sure that, we take the time to spend time with the animals and each other, and just enjoy what we have, and see the happiness that the animals here have, I think offsets some of that sadness. But it's definitely difficult living in a non-vegan world.
Yeah, and I think one other challenge is figuring out like the best approach, because I think some people are like very focused on just like sort of shoving the message down as aggressively as they can, and some people are focused on as being, I guess, as gentle as they can. And I think neither of those works for everyone, and so you have to sort of figure out how to sell a message that has so many reactions possible. And so knowing when to stand your ground and to fight for animals, and knowing when, sort of being tactfully kind about it can be more effective for certain people, and beating yourself up when you feel like you've done it wrong, and like feeling like you could have done better, almost like every day sort of like your actions determine like the fate of the world. It's like I think there's some sense of like we have to achieve this as quickly as possible because so many are depending on things changing.